Today, I'm joined by Naama Sheba. She's the VP Marketing of Fraugster. We're going to be chatting through trends in fraud prevention and e-commerce. So, first of all, Naama, could you just give us a quick one line on who Fraugster is?
Absolutely. So Fraugster is a payment security company that helps e-commerce businesses and payment companies to intelligently manage the impact of fraud on their business through its AI technology and products.
I'm imagining it's been a pretty busy year for you guys then in 2020. And I'm really keen to hear from your perspective what the e-commerce sector, the fraud prevention sector learned from 2020. What were some of those key trends that you saw coming through?
Sure, I'd love to share that. Well, first, yes, 2020 was extremely busy because luckily enough, the e-commerce industry saw a lot of advancement through the COVID-19 pandemic. Basically, the industry accelerated by 5 years in the
Right.
span of this 1 year. And when e-commerce grows, then also fraud grows. And we're lucky to be in the fraud prevention business. So it was a busy and good year for us. In terms of the 3 points, I think what is very clear to me is that automation and digitalization are key to growth, and that has proven itself very true for e-commerce businesses. The second one is about fulfillment and delivery that are crucial, even more than ever. I mean, shoppers are shopping online, they want their products delivered home. In 2020, it's not just regular satisfaction. Sometimes people's lives depended on it, being in lockdown and really needed things to
Yeah.
be there when they wanted it. So for e-commerce businesses, that meant that delivery is a much bigger focus than before. And then the third learning, which is not new but is truer than ever, is that fraudsters will take advantage of every loophole. So with the growth of e-commerce, there is a lot of new opportunities for fraudsters.
Yeah, and,
Yeah.
and interesting that you mentioned automation and fulfillment. Are you seeing those trends in particular impact fraud prevention and the opportunities fraudsters are seeing, as you've mentioned?
Yes, I mean, I definitely see a connection between the two because a lot of merchants still rely on manual review as part of their fraud
Right.
prevention system. So they may use rules, they may use machine learning models, but eventually a lot of merchants are still reliant on manual reviews at the end of the process to check the biggest purchases or the ones that they perceive as high risk. And when you have more transactions, more volume to take care of, you have less time to monitor fraud. So it means that either your manual review deteriorates in quality, or
Right.
or that you spend the time, but then delivery is delayed. So you have to to find a way to automate everything, and I think this is where fraud prevention automation is crucial. So AI technology can really serve the purpose of saving this whole hassle of manual reviews while ensuring that that fraud prevention is at its highest quality, letting merchants actually focus on the fulfillment and delivery.
Got it. Makes total sense. And, on the back of that super busy year and busy period, what's on your radar as we, kind of move ever further into 2021? What are some of the challenges, opportunities, the big themes that are on your radar this year?
Well, I think for us it's very clear that there are two themes. One, it's how we help merchants keep balancing the potential growth that has come from this acceleration in e-commerce and the growing threat. Because after all, fraud prevention is a balancing act. The idea is that we let as many good customers through while we keep the fraudsters away.
Yeah.
And with the growth in e-commerce, this is becoming a bigger challenge because I mean we see this growth coming from two directions. One is that there are more and more new shoppers. So a lot of people who never shopped online actually shift to online shopping in 2020 because of the pandemic, and the expectation is that once this habit was created, it's going to be adopted and kept on.
Sure.
And the other one is that some offline businesses actually turned to online in order not to get out of
Of
business.
course.
Um, and these novice users, so to say, are not always familiar with the security measures that should be applied to online businesses. And that means, how, which accounts you use, which passwords you use for, for the individuals, but also merchants who might not have the most sophisticated fraud prevention tools on their hands, especially when you're starting out a new business, or, basically your shop is not that big to allow yourself to have a fraud prevention team in-house.
Got it.
So
And that's really interesting, isn't it? With kind of, merchants going online for the
yes.
first time. I'm sure there was quite a wave of that kind of activity in 2020, being more exposed because, as you say, their own online knowledge is perhaps limited, whereas the fraudsters have been honing their skills for quite some time in the space. And so actually the first time online merchants are perhaps disproportionately exposed. So I guess you're saying that even SMEs, those small medium businesses, should be as plugged into fraud prevention measures as the bigger enterprise level organizations.
I mean, absolutely. I'll try to draw a metaphor. It's like, the large enterprises are like armies, and, they have, a team of fraud prevention in place, which, uses rule systems or manual review or machine learning models. But to actually shift that and follow, the newest trends and the newest fraud attacks that happen, it's like shifting an army when you're faced with guerrilla warriors that are super agile. They have the fastest tactic, the newest tools, they find all the loopholes, all the cracks to go in. And then the SMEs are like this, single combat people who don't have the whole backup and the force of an army behind them.
Yeah.
So the idea is that, an advanced fraud prevention solution that is based on AI can really help solve the problem for both these SMEs and the large enterprises.
Great. What else is on your radar this year?
Well, you're in UK, I'm in Europe, obviously, PSD2.
Don't rub it in.
I don't think there's anyone in the e-commerce space, or fraud prevention space that is not preoccupied with PSD2.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the objective for anyone who's not familiar with that is that online shopping becomes more safe. So payments are more secure with the enforcement of the strong customer authentication. And while this long-term objective is obviously wonderful, the short-term effect is actually that it causes friction for users. What we're seeing in Fraugster, only with the first month of implementation, which is in partial markets and only with partial thresholds, is that there's nearly a 4% drop-off and decline, basically, when you're comparing January 2021 to January 2020. And that is really, when not all markets have deployed that, and it's not fully implemented. So the idea is that basically in the coming month, we're expecting that the approval rates, so the number of transactions that are being accepted by the merchant and later by the issuing bank would drop even more. And what we are trying to do for our merchants is obviously trying to help them get as many transactions through. What's the beauty of PSD2 is that it allows some exemption cases. So for transactions of low amount, transactions of low risk, or recurring transactions, basically the transactions don't have to go through strong customer authentication. So what Fraugster is trying to do is really to help merchants identify which transaction qualify for these exemptions and basically route them through the path of least resistance. So more and more legitimate customers actually get to the checkout moment and just pay and get the transaction done without being forced to go through the two-factor authentication.
So that's really interesting for us in the UK, because we are letting some of our European counterparts, I guess, tread that path ahead of us, because it comes in a little later in the UK. I think it's, towards the autumn. And so I guess what's quite interesting for e-commerce companies in the UK is to look at the kind of content that companies like Fraugster are delivering, as they kind of test and learn and improve this for e-commerce customers, because that's a more real and present challenge for you guys right now.
I mean, absolutely. We see the enforcement coming out in Germany, in France, and indeed in the UK, it's going to be September. So I think, for anyone who's operating in the UK, he has they have the benefit of, making sure that they're prepped, that they have all the processes, all the documentation in place, and then looking at counterparts in Europe to see what their businesses are going through. And
Yeah.
learning from that.
Yeah. And speaking of content, we know that talking to a lot of our contacts, journalists, and end customers as well, that 2020 really saw quite the digital deluge, as we've been referring to it as. So, and we know that ourselves, right? As human beings, we can all be swamped with content, from webinars to opinion pieces and white papers all day long. And I'm really intrigued, as this kind of education content and explanation content that you guys do, what have you done through 2020 that's really helped cut through, that you will be carrying into 2021, even as life, all being well, starts to change and possibly get back to a little bit of normal behavior? What has really worked for you?
Well, I think, you're spot on with your observation, that there's so much content going around, and, everyone's trying to basically spread the word using webinars, using digital events, everything went digital. I think what worked very well for us is really to pinpoint our audiences, to really choose carefully who are the companies and personas that we want to talk to, and specifically target them either through media partners or on custom audiences on LinkedIn. Really finding the right partners. Obviously, there are so many opportunities out there, in terms of media outlets and event organizers, and it's really about finding this correlation between who are the people that we want to talk to and who are the people who are in their databases, and then finding really the right content. So it's about the audience and the message, and what definitely works for our audience is obviously PSD2, which has been a major concern. So any content around PSD2, which is what the directive is all about, what are the implications, and specifically how to be prepared for that. We prepared a checklist for merchants of what they actually need to look for when they're getting ready for PSD2, which is very very useful, and has got really nice responses. The idea is that we want to help merchants get ready, so that rang a bell with them. And then the other one is really the focus about the checkout moment. So we've identified that the checkout is a moment of truth, where it's basically make it or break it. Every merchant spends so much in acquisition of shoppers. It starts with with the advertising, and then it goes to search. So basically, shoppers now just don't buy blindly, but they do some online research about the products that they're looking for. They actually get to your store from the search result page, and then they have to select the product. So there's a lot of investment in the right assortment. Not necessarily the product that led them in is the one that they're eventually buy. So displaying the right assortment, all of that is quite a lot of investment. And then you get to this final moment where you're supposed to pay and check out. And if that moment fails, then everything that was invested before is basically lost. And this is what we're focusing on: how to help merchants win at that moment, ensure that there is zero friction, because the implication for that is twofold. One, that's the moment where the transaction is completed and the revenues are recognized. So obviously there's the immediate win, but then there's the long-term effect of the online trust. Because when you lose a customer because the checkout moment was broken, then you're risking, one is that customer will never shop with you again. Research shows that 60% of shoppers whose payment was denied will never go back to the store again. Right. And the second one is that people tend to talk, and I am sure you're not going to be surprised that people talk more about their negative experiences than
Yeah,
their
of
positive
course.
experiences.
Of
People
course.
are 50% more likely to share a negative experience than a positive one. And with one negative review, it might deter 22% of other shoppers. With 2 and 3 negative reviews, the numbers go up all the way to 50, 60%. So obviously, it's not just the loyalty with a specific shopper that merchants want to retain. It's about their online reputation for every other potential shopper. So winning at this moment, winning at the checkout moment of truth, this is what we're focusing on for our merchants.
That's so interesting. So that checkout moment of truth is both message and differentiation for you as an organization, and it also plays through to the work that you've done, hyper targeting your audience and understanding their behaviors as well, because I think it's so important, particularly in B2B comms, not to just lump a B2B audience together and use those same techniques, personas, etc., to understand the different groupings of your audiences, so that that message is going to resonate. So, and does that look like for you guys, is that still then a mix of owned, paid and earned?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's you can't just do one these days. So what we're doing is basically essentially a combination. So we're creating our own content, which goes through our network, which goes on the website, and then we're topping it up with some paid campaigns around the same content.
And it's great to hear that LinkedIn is proving a success. That's something we're seeing across the board, really, that it's working very hard alongside other channels, as you say, to really deliver on that hyper targeting. So yes, certainly some things that are worth carrying forward into 2021 by the sounds of it. Look, I'd love to thank you for sharing your thoughts with me today, Naama. It's been great talking to you about all things e-commerce and fraud prevention, and I hope we can speak again soon.
Same here, Debbie. It's always a pleasure.